Welcome to ODI Bites, a series of events that will address critical global challenges with key experts. In this episode, we discuss women and the future of work, reflecting on the impacts, opportunities and challenges for gender equality and women's economic security, ensuring the future of work is bright for women. We hear perspectives from Reema Nanavaty, Director of Economic and Rural Organising at the Self-Employed Women's Association and former member of the ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work, and Abigail Hunt, Research Fellow of Equity and Social Policy at ODI. What does the future of work look like for women? What trends are likely to impact gender equality and women's economic security?
I think the first point is that many historic gender equalities look set to persist or worsen. So in recent decades, there has been some progress. More women globally have entered the paid workforce. But projections to 2030 show that traditional gender gaps in labour market participation look set to persist or worsen. And this is likely to be exacerbated by the current corona crisis. And just inclusion in the labour market doesn't tell the whole story, because when women are in paid work, they're often overrepresented in poor quality employment. For example, in the sectors of the informal economy, most characterised by economic precarity and lack of protections. Even in the formal economy, women are often in non-standard employment, notably part-time work. Alongside the undervaluation of work in sectors in which women are traditionally concentrated, such as health, social and domestic services, this has led to persistent gender wage gaps. I think it's also critical to mention that the unpaid care and domestic work disproportionately carried out by women around the world is closely linked to the world of paid work, because we know that taking on more paid work without support for unpaid care work leads to women's time poverty, with negative effects for their health and well-being. And evidence also shows that unpaid care roles push women into the kind of lower quality and informal jobs I previously mentioned. But in addition to looking at past trends and how they might play out in the future, we also need to better understand newer emerging trends. And this includes critical areas like whether economic development will provide quality labour market opportunities for women, how automation will affect female-dominated sectors, the impacts of digital technology in traditional labour markets, for example, through the so-called gig economy, and the effects of demographic change and increased migration flows. So those are some of the things that our research at ODI has picked up on, but it would be really interesting to hear from Sewa's experience.
Sure, I think big ideas can be made easy to digest, and I wish to make them easy to implement. Big ideas achieve big results only when they are implemented. So I'll draw from my work with the Global Commission on Future of Work, and from my work with over 2 million women workers who are the SEWA members. The future of work offers both new opportunities and continued challenges for workers, especially for women workers. At the Global Commission on Future of Work, I was alarmed to see the fact that large number of women are slipping into lower wages, less and outdated asset ownership, diminishing access to labor market, scattered and inadequate social protection measures, limited or no decent place of work and to live. And often both are same for the informal sector women workers. Most eye-opening was the need for far more direct measures by the authorities and corporations to reach out to women workers. These gaps and challenges are well documented, but the use of these documents, operationalization of these documents is far from adequate. Knowledge about the challenges to women workers is not put to direct action as much as is needed. Not only women's labor force participation is poor, but the nature and extent of poor condition, unacceptable terms of their participation is worrisome.
What are the biggest opportunities and challenges for gender equality in the future world of work?
For me, it's really important that emerging trends are actively turned into an opportunity. For example, if we take the fact that demographic change is set to increase demand for care services, and therefore the number of care work jobs. Now, we know that existing care roles are often filled by women, including by many internal and international migrant workers, but these roles are often not covered by full labour and social protections. And this means that the growing demand for care risks expanding a sector already characterised by poor working conditions. And there's therefore also a huge risk that gender disparities in the world of work will also grow. But on the other hand, there's also an opportunity to improve conditions by ensuring that the jobs created are appropriately regulated, that they're well paid, and that they have protections attached. So I think the key point is that nothing is predestined, and that achieving gender equality in the future world of work will depend on the policy decisions that are made now and in the coming years. What do you think, Reema?
Sure, I think the biggest opportunities are in ownership, management, and operation of digital technology by women and their organizations. The women workers must own digital technology, not just to be a labor force for it. Similarly, the health sector must be fully and finally feminized. That is, women must own, manage, and operate health sector. May it be large pharmaceutical or health infrastructure or R&D labs. Similarly, all adaptation to changing climate, urban to rural to agriculture to industrial to digital to geospatial, it all has to be in the area of work where women can consolidate their achievement and preserve and, in fact, expand their numbers and volumes. The same would apply when we come to COVID recovery plans. The post pandemic recovery plans need to bring women in central. This is the opportunity. Let me also talk about some of the opportunities that we see which women themselves, the women workers, have really grabbed upon. We see the vegetable growers, the small farmers, and the vegetable vendors connecting together and using the digital platforms and building a digital enterprise to provide vegetables directly to the customers. And that's how you are building a whole supply chain where you are eliminating the middlemen and thereby increasing the bargaining power. The second example is of decentralized supply chains. We saw that the central and the national supply chains came all to a grinding halt, but the decentralized supply chains were all functioning, whether it was in the garment sector or in the food sector. So this is the time to look at how do you rebuild, repurpose the supply chains where the workers are in the center and they are the owners and managers.
What are the most important policy measures to ensure the future of work is bright for women?
First and foremost, policymakers need to take a far more wide-ranging view of how the current economic and social system both produces and sustains inequality, because ultimately what we need is a much more gender transformative approach. Now, in practice, this means a lot more joining the dots, for example, by bringing together economic, labour and social policy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a key priority is supporting the creation of quality employment. But not only that, but ensuring that women can access those jobs when they're created. Alongside this, we need to reinforce the role and delivery of social protection, which is critical to support women's economic stability and unpaid care. And I think in some cases, this will even mean re-examining the fundamentals. So, for example, the relationship between labour and social policy, given that many social protection systems are designed around a model of workers in formal, continuous and full-time employment, which, as I previously mentioned, is not the norm for many women. I think there's another couple of critical pieces of the puzzle. We really need to create the fiscal space to provide protection. And this is wide-ranging. It means everything from resourcing the enforcement of labour regulation to providing sustainable financing for social protection, as well as making a really serious effort to tackle persistent challenges, such as discriminatory gender norms. Now, I do really think it's important to remember that this isn't all new. Many governments have already made very relevant commitments, for example, through ILO conventions and the Sustainable Development Goals. And fully implementing these would be a huge step forward. But there does remain a need to identify gaps in existing frameworks, make sure that they're fit for purpose for the future of work, and move towards a more comprehensive and gender transformative policy agenda.
I think, Abigail, from what you said, it needs courage and bravado to look ahead into future of women's work as the economic slowdown and the pandemic unfold. Both cannot be mixed. Both are our own creation, and both independently and jointly take away income, asset protection, and a future from the women workers. The economy we have will not fully and suitably offer a future for women's work. We have seen the limits of this economic development pathway. The economic pathway is violent on women, on workers, on community, on living beings in ecosystem and natural resources. New economic pathway is needed. Our Seva sisters have already shown a way that we try to follow and develop. It is called building an economy of nurturance. There are three things different in building an economy of nurturance from the traditional economic pathway. It is not a fixed model or a plan or a definition. It is a process. It is a process building jointly, collectively, creatively, and collaboratively. Second, it is about economy not in isolation, but economy as linked with politics and society, and that leads to democratic ways of working, which are so much needed in the current times. Nurturance, thirdly, is not seen as a passive way of taking care, but as an active and assertive way of nurturance, where all violence, direct and indirect, on human beings and all living beings, or even on inanimate objects, is spotted, recognized, and actively addressed. We cannot forget that the current economy in which poverty and vulnerability of women as workers is with social consent, with economic consent, and as we at Seva have found it, we call it as poverty, is also a form of violence. And therefore, the new economic development has to end poverty and bring dignity and peace for all.
Final thoughts.
Well, I think a future of work lens offers a rare opportunity to think beyond the current policy cycle and put in place long-lasting strategies for women's rights and gender equality. And there's no doubt about it, the challenge is huge. But what the COVID crisis has shown clearly is that labour and social policies, which were previously unimaginable, both politically and practically, can happen, which gives me huge hope that a better future of work for women is within our reach.
In order to have a better future of work, I think it is high time that we feminize the health sector, feminize the digital world, and feminize adaptation and adaptation to changing climate. And then that will bring a future of work for women workers, which is just, dignified, and decent workplace for all.
Thank you for tuning in to ODI Bites. Find out more on odi.org/events.